As China and Japan continue to assert territorial claims in the East China Sea, the U.S. is making its stance quite clear. On Friday, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said that Washington will not recognize China's air defense zone and stressed its commitment to the defense of Japan. Kerry met with Japan's Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida in Washington ahead of a visit to China and other Asian countries next week. CCTV's Nathan King has more now from our newsroom.
That's right, Mike. This visit by Fumio Kishida was a chance to show the world the strength of the U.S.-Japanese alliance ahead of that key trip by Kerry to China next week. And while both nations outwardly expressed that sentiment, there have been strains in the alliance that are complicating regional security in Asia. In step together, the U.S. confirming the strength of the Japanese alliance.
That the United States remains as committed as ever to upholding our treaty obligations with our Japanese allies.
Just days away from a visit to China, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry also chose to reiterate U.S. opposition to China's recently announced air defense identification zone.
The United States neither recognizes nor accepts China's declared East China Sea ADIZ, and the United States has no intention of changing how we conduct operations in the region.
Japan also referred to the disputed Diaoyu Islands in the East China Sea, which Tokyo nationalized in 2012.
We believe that we will respond calmly and with resolve.
But despite the display of unity, there have been strains in the alliance recently. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's recent controversial visit to the Yasukuni War Shrine, which honors Japanese war dead, including convicted World War II criminals, was condemned by Washington and the world.
We do believe that Japan is an important ally and a great ally in Asia. However, we have the United States government, as well as the analysts who study Japan, are very troubled by some of the statements and some of the actions that are coming out of the Japanese government and people that have been appointed by the Japanese government.
Those include a statement from Japanese public broadcaster board member Naoki Hayukuta, who claimed last week that the 1937 Nanjing massacre of Chinese at the hands of invading Japanese forces never happened. There are also tensions over the controversial planned relocation of some U.S. forces on the Japanese island of Okinawa. And while both countries say they are determined to negotiate a massive free trade deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership between 12 nations, it still has big hurdles to overcome. And it includes U.S. access to Japan's closed-off car market and the opening up of Japan's agriculture sector. But Friday's message from John Kerry was unequivocal, a display of unity from the U.S. and Japan. And it's been a week of strong statements from Washington, which will make Kerry's trip to China, Mike, next week even more interesting.
Interesting indeed. So what are we expecting from it? After all, U.S.-China relations have been a bit rocky in recent months.
Yeah, do you remember when just after China announced the ADIZ, the air zone, Joe Biden, the U.S. Vice President, went over and we didn't really hear much about it. It was kind of during the first days of that. But we've seen in the last week or so, not just statements from U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, but also his Assistant Secretary of State Danny Russell for East Asia, which have been a lot stronger. And the big question, I think, in Beijing is, are they going to raise the ADIZ, the air zone? And if so, are they going to ask China to scrap it? Because that hasn't been part of the official communique in the future. And we know very well from what Beijing has been saying is, look, we've had this zone because everyone else has them. Okay, we were later than everyone else, but Japan's had one for the last 40 years. The Republic of Korea has one. The US has several. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the U.S., with its traditional alliances, of course, with Japan, of course, the Philippines as well, deals with this issue and what they actually ask of Beijing. So it's going to be very, very interesting over the next few weeks. And of course, remember, we have President Obama's trip to Asia coming up in April as well. So a lot of the groundwork that Kerry is going to be doing over the next week or so is going to affect the region and the pivot to Asia when the president goes there in April.
And it's fascinating. Nathan, thank you so much.
Thanks
Nathan
so much.
King.